So a couple weeks ago I did my male privilege video regarding the bunch of male privileges that were listed down in a MIT EDU website release. This week I'm going over something that source material sourced from. And I wanted to make a very clear and clean point on both of these and why all of it is a bunch of bullshit. But first, I wanted to go over what they claim white privilege is and what they claim whiteness is. Essentially, from what I can understand of all the literature that I've read so far, the white privilege is a set of privileges that I should have being a white person. We can easily debunk this by pointing at the first homeless person we see who's also white, or the drug-addicted person we first see who's also white, and contrasting them with somebody with a $6 million income that whines about somebody calling them the N-bomb on the street, and see who has more privileges.
Am I better off than a homeless person somewhere out there in that view? Of course I am. Of course I am. Do I look like an idiot to you? Do you think I acquired what I have acquired being a self-righteous, self-consumed idiot? Oblivious to my money and the power of my money? And let me tell you, regardless of what you think I look like, I'm not. I didn't get this far being an idiot. But having come this far, I have a responsibility to speak out and to notify you white people to let you know that even a homeless, that there is power in a homeless white male, white female. There is power in your white skin. Regardless of your economic status, there is power in your white skin, whether you want to admit it or not, that I do not have, that black people, that my black skin does not have.
But this exercise is going to be a little bit different. And yes, I do mean exercise. I want you guys to do something with me. First, we're going to do the exact same thing that this source material that's in a journal that people cite from, claiming this is valid and good research. I want you to do the same thing that they do. I want you to take the next moment, go ahead and pause this video if you so feel, and just think about all the things that you get by being white.
I come here to challenge you and see if you're as good as they say you are. Do you want trouble?
I can give you a couple hints, of course, if I so choose, of the things that they claim about being white. Let's read off the top few real quick. I can, if I wish, to be arranged in the company of people of my race most of the time. I can avoid spending time with people whom I was trained to mistrust and who have learned to mistrust my kind or me. If I should move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and which I would want to live. So without going any further, essentially what they're saying is if they live in a majority populated area, yes, you're going to run into more white people of your same majority. So true is it that you could move to Utah, where I'm from, and pretty much not run into one single minority your entire time there, because they stay in their own isolated group, they stay in their clique, and the white people are 97% the entire population of Utah. Not that hard. Yet still here I am. But after that exercise, and you think about a few things that you claim are your privileges for being white, I want you to then assume, does that work for, or can you do the same thing as a minority? And minority, I mean the majority in United States and most of the developed countries that are first world are white countries. If you were in South Africa, being a white person, could you guarantee that? How about Indonesia? Would it be the same? How about China? Japan? Any place that's not majority white, would that be the same? Now, I wanted to quote a piece out of this wonderful article that pretty much put the nail on the head, and I stopped taking it seriously from that point forward. And so should everybody else that thinks they want to be scientific when it comes to this kind of stuff. To quote, "I'll review here several types or layers of denial that I see at working, protecting, and preventing awareness about entrenched male privilege. Then I would draw parallels from my own experience with the denials that veil the facts of white privilege. Finally, I will list 46 ordinary daily ways in which I experience having white privilege by contrast with my African American colleagues in the same building. This list is not intended to be generalizable. Others can make their own list from within their own life circumstances." Stop right there. This list is not intended to be generalizable. In science, or the scientific method, if they were to follow such things, and not just write opinion pieces as this clearly is just demonstrated, to not to be generalizable means that your extrapolation of what you experience as white privilege cannot therefore necessarily be applied to the entire group or larger population. What does this mean? The experiences of the individual do not apply to the entire population. So claiming that these are a list of exhaustive male or white privileges, but then they're not generalizable, means that you have no basis in reality when you try to extract this. These are your personal biases and lived experiences. And biases are in general unreliable and cannot be used in any scientific notation. It's worthless bullshit. But let's dive a little bit further, because I found on Psychology Today a gem of a quote that I'm going to share with you right now. The quote was not in opposition, but in favor of the existence of whiteness and white racial identity. What's amazing to me is every other race gets to identify and describe their own racial identity of what it is to be black, what it is to be Hispanic, Latinx, African American, Asian American, and so on and so forth. All these get to define their own existence and their own racial identity, except white people. And this is why. To quote, "For example, James Weldon Johnson, an African-American poet and anthologist, observed in 1912 that," end quote, "the colored people of this country know and understand the white people better than the white people will ever know and understand themselves."
That's right. You fools! I said so, and I'm right. Okay.
In 1912, this was observed, and this was categorically dismissed in 1960 with another famous quote that no one actually ever cares to listen to, and instead goes directly against.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
He's a man of justice and righteousness. I admire such a man.
When you start to judge people based on the color of their skin and not by the content of their character, you are therefore perpetuating racist ideology. But that's not the whole thing. Basically, the whiteness and white privilege is stereotyping white racial identity in favor of their own demonized moral ambiguity. This is what I mean by this. Essentially, the white man is the source of all their problems. According to their own stereotypes, they place the white man or the white person in a superior position to everyone else merely because we are the majority in first world countries such as Australia, UK, the United States, and so on. They wish to remove the majority in favor of them being the majority. Why? It makes no sense to me. If you're going to trade one race for the other, what makes you think that the next race to be the majority would not be the one that's demonized as the oppressor? Because now they are the majority. You just shot yourself in the foot at that point. This is going to be a toilet bowl of identity politics. The whole idea of the white racial identity has perplexed me because I have no concept of it. It's a tribal position. It's tribalism to its core. I don't quite understand it. I'm not a tribal person. I don't look to hang out in groups. I do my own thing and I judge my own self and everybody else based on my own criteria, which is to say, how they act toward me is how I will treat them. Period. That's it. It's pretty simple. Of course, this too is considered white privilege. The fact that I can sit here and say, I don't care what you look like, is considered a white privilege. Meritocracy has been turned into white privilege. Unfortunately for them, the more they dig into the identity politics, as Jordan Peterson once said, the more they'll have to lean to and eventually come to individualism. They'll come down to a point where they have to find the most unique traits of one individual person or group thereof, and it will come down to the individual person. So it leads down the same path. It's just they want to be tribal while doing it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Tribalism is another silly superstition that we've carried forward. It's a part of our ancestry. It's a part of our evolutionary biology. We're prone to be social species and we want to stay within the same troop or the same social net or group. So we out anybody that doesn't fit within our bubble, our group. This is the same thing we see in politics. You're either a Democrat or you're a Republican in the United States. There is no third party. We won't allow a third party. It's us versus them. It's very tribal. It's very idiotic. As much as it may be. I was thinking of doing a full presentation. I was thinking of doing all these other things. And I was like, no, this doesn't quite fit because they didn't take the time to be intellectually rigorous and actually test these things to find out if they were true or generalizable. Instead, they wrote an opinion piece that made it into a women's studies journal and then said, yes, this is true. I guess it goes right up there with Christy Winter's request for a robust feminist argument.
Why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument. Robust feminist argument. Robust feminist argument.
This is written by one of the third-wave feminism geniuses in women's studies, who didn't bother doing a study, but instead just looked at herself and did some reflection and said, yeah, I have all these privileges because I'm white. This is a bad thing. None of them made any sense to me. You're talking about demographics in an area where you can move? Makes no sense. And one of the things I wanted to point out in all of these is the second one I read. I can avoid spending time with people whom I was trained to mistrust and who I have learned to mistrust, my kind or me. And the one I wanted to point out in the end was the second one in this list. I can avoid spending time with people who I am And the one I wanted to point out in that list before I let you go is the second one. I can avoid spending time with people whom I was trained to mistrust and who have learned to mistrust my kind or me. Wasn't there an article that was just written on this very thing?
We want to tell you about an op-ed that ran in the New York Times over the weekend you might not have seen. The writer, who's a law professor in New York called Echo Yonka, asked a simple question. Can my children be friends with white people? He really asked it, and he wasn't optimistic. Quote, I will teach my boys the lesson generations old, he wrote. I will teach them to be cautious. I will teach them suspicion. I will teach them distrust. I will teach my boys to have profound doubts that friendship with white people is possible. Those doubts mirrored the writer's own. As he put it, quote, history has provided little reason for people of color to trust white people. That piece was one of the most popular on the New York Times website, even today. It was hardly unusual, though. Go to any liberal website, Salon, Slate, Vox, HuffPo, and you'll find similar pieces arguing that an entire racial group is untrustworthy and dangerous. This is a big change for the left. For most of the 20th century, liberals, and it was noble, argued that it was immoral to reward or punish people based on their skin color. Individuals ought to be judged solely by the choices they make. Anything less is bigotry. Liberals don't say that anymore. What happened?
That's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And do try to do that thought experiment. Just take some time and put yourself in their shoes. Just like an atheist knows pretty much everything there is about religion, why not understand these and the way these people think?